My dad told me, "We all decided you're not welcome at Christmas." I didn't shed a tear. I texted back, "Okay, have fun," and cancelled every autopay, the $2,750 mortgage, the utilities, the $7,000 holiday catering. By nightfall, my phone was flooded with 42 missed calls. Can you even fathom the gut punch of being told you uninvited to Christmas by your own father, only for your bank to then remind you that you're footing the bill for the very house they are celebrating in? My entire world, the one I thought was solid, shattered that morning. That day started like any other cold December morning in Seattle. The gray light filtered through my window, making everything feel quiet, fragile. I was just there, barefoot in my tiny kitchen, a warm mug in my hands, completely oblivious to the earthquake about to hit. I actually remember thinking, this will be a normal day. Oh, how wrong I was. It's crazy how fast your life can just tilt. I opened my laptop, expecting the usual holiday chaos from my family's group chat. You know, Heather arguing about recipes, my dad barking orders about arrival times, my mum reminding everyone to label dishes. But that morning, nothing. A blank wall. No Christmas emojis, no decorating photos, not even a passive-aggressive jab from my sister. I refreshed. Then again. Still nothing. Then I tried our shared drive for the holiday menu. Access denied. Red letters, glowing, sharp, intentional. My chest tightened, that familiar, suffocating feeling. I stood there, mug halfway to my mouth, my heart pounding. 4 years, I'd been the one keeping their house afloat. Mortgage, utilities, internet, repairs. All quietly paid from my account because I made good money, and because my parents had asked in that soft, guilt-soaked way that made it impossible to say no. Dad always said he'd handle the fun stuff like Christmas, and I'd handle the boring things. He said it like it was a compliment. It never, ever felt like one. I set my mug down and grabbed my phone, telling myself I was overthinking. Maybe a new thread. Maybe Dad forgot to add me. A glitch. The excuses didn't comfort me. A new voicemail blinked. Late last night. I pressed play, holding the phone tight. My dad's voice filled the kitchen. Cold, flat, that same tone he used when he wanted me to know he had the final say. He said they had talked. He said they had all agreed. He said I was not welcome at Christmas this year. No hesitation. No explanation. Just the verdict. I froze. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. My shoulders braced, like my body already knew the blow was coming. An ache crawled up my throat. One eye swallowed hard. I stared out at the apartments across the way. A woman was shaking a rug, laughing with her dog. Ordinary life, simple and warm, carried on outside while mine just tightened. I replayed the voicemail, quieter this time. Maybe the second listen would change the meaning. It didn't. It just made the memory sharper. The last Christmas there. I'd arrived late after a work deployment went sideways. Dad had stood there, in front of everyone, and asked if I'd finally decided to join the living. People laughed. They always did when he mocked someone. My face burned as I set down the food I'd made at dawn. Mom pretended not to notice. Heather rolled her eyes, told me to relax. I'd always pushed that memory down. But not this time. This time, it held its ground. I sank into a chair, my fingers curling around my phone, aching. The trembling in my hands wasn't fear. It was clarity, a quiet recognition washing over me. They didn't forget me. They didn't overlook me. They chose to exclude me. The voicemail was still open on my screen. My thumb hovered. Then, I tapped save. The click felt final. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I felt older than 32 in that moment. Tired, not from lack of sleep, but from years of something deeper. But under that tiredness, something steady was forming. A line, a boundary I didn't recognize, but knew I desperately needed. My phone buzzed. Not Dad. My work calendar, a meeting in an hour. The ordinary world tugged at me. I set the phone face up. The voicemail icon still glowed. The sky had shifted from gray to dull silver. I watched the light, letting every thought settle, like snow on a quiet street, slow, heavy, clear. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. My hand steadied. My breath evened out. And then, a new notification. Soft as a whisper. A name I hadn't expected. My brain didn't quite process it at first. A friendly reminder that my automatic payment of $2,750 for the Crane Ridge property in Tacoma would process in 2 days. I just sat there, staring. My dad had just told me I wasn't welcome, that they all agreed, and here was my bank, cheerfully reminding me I was about to pay for the roof over their heads. Something in me clicked star. I set the mug down, carefully, and opened my laptop. My hands went straight to the banking tab. Muscle memory. The dashboard came up. Checking. Savings. Retirement. And then, like a rock in the middle of a stream, mortgage, Crane Ridge, Tacoma. Upcoming payment $2,750. My throat went dry. I opened the transaction history. Month after month. Same amount. Same day. For almost 4 years. I did a quick calculation. Numbers stacked up. It was more than most people make in a year. It was more than my parents had ever put into my future. I had been sending that money out, quietly, while my dad held court at family dinners, bragging about how hard he worked to provide. I clicked out and opened my personal spreadsheet, the one I'd started in my early 20s. Back then, I tracked lottos. Recently, it was all mortgage, utilities, internet, property tax. The sheet loaded. My own notes glared back. Crane paid. Crane paid again. Electric paid. Gas paid. Most were tagged family house. My jaw clenched. There was a scanned link in one corner. Loan documents. I clicked. The PDF loaded. Black letters too sharp in the morning light. Property owner, George Mitchell and Dana Mitchell. My dad and mom. Underneath, borrower information, my dad and mom. And then, co-borrower, Lauren Mitchell. My name. No mention of co-owner. No shed titles. I was just a name the bank needed. Not a person with any claim. I remember the day Dad brought those papers to my Seattle apartment. Fresh promotion, making $350,000. He sat at my tiny kitchen table, talking about opportunity, family, and how this house would be part of our legacy. He said the bank needed my income for a better rate, and that once things were stable, they'd add me to the deed. Mom had nodded along, eyes down, coffee mug clutched. I had wanted so badly to believe him. Looking at the document now, that memory felt like a scene from someone else's life. My stomach twisted. I scrolled through the fine print, hunting for something that would prove I'd misunderstood. It wasn't there. I leaned back, rubbing my forehead. My breath sounded too loud in the quiet kitchen. Traffic hummed faintly outside, like a low ocean. I thought about all the times Dad introduced the house as something *he built. The way he puffed up when neighbors complimented the kitchen. He never mentioned his daughter in Seattle, quietly writing most of the checks. I flipped back to my spreadsheet and added a new column. I labeled it with a small, bitter smile. Reality. In that column, I started tallying what I had contributed. Mortgage totals, utility totals, renovation costs, the new washer when the old one flooded, the roof patch after the heavy rain, the electrician bill when the wiring failed inspection. When I finished, my head spun. More than 90%. That was the estimate. Over 90% of the money keeping that house standing had come from me, while my dad told everyone he was carrying the family. I sat there, listening to the faint tick of the clock. A hot, little pulse of anger throbbed behind my eyes. Not the wild kind you yell with, but the quiet kind that sits down and takes notes. On impulse, I opened my email and searched Crane Ridge. A trail of messages appeared, bank reminders, utility notices, receipts from home improvement stores. All addressed to me. None of them ever mentioned at family dinners. I clicked into an email from 2 years ago, a huge plumbing bill I'd paid. I'd even written to Dad, explaining the cost, saying it was covered, but that we needed boundaries. His reply was short, almost dismissive. Something about family helps each other, and with your big tech salary, it's the least you can do. I read it again. That same old pinch in my chest. Only this time, it didn't make me small. It made me clay. I switched to messages and scrolled back through the family thread. 4 years, it was where we shared pictures. Somewhere along the line, it turned into Dad lobbing instructions and Heather tagging along. I scrolled until I hit a block of messages from around the time I signed the loan papers. Dad had promised to explain things to the family later. He had, in his own way. There was a separate thread, one I hadn't paid attention to back then. He'd added me to it asterisk after asterisk the fact. My fingers slowed when I saw the name, Mitchell Co. I opened it. Lots of chat. Dad complaining about bills. Heather griping about her life. Then my eyes landed on a small cluster of messages that made my stomach flip. Heather wrote, "At least someone in this family is useful." My dad replied, "Lauren should be grateful she can pay for something real instead of wasting money on her downtown apartment and silly gadgets." Heather sent a laughing emoji. Lauren always was a bit full of herself. And then my brother Adam, "As long as she keeps the money flowing, I can tolerate the attitude." I read that last line 3 times. It was one thing to asterisk feel asterisk used. This was a transaction, approved in a group chat. They weren't just leaning on me. They were measuring my value in dollars, commenting on it like a show. My hand started to tremble. I set the phone down, picked it back up. Screenshots. Every soft click felt like a nail going into wood. I dropped them into a new folder on my desktop, named it Evidence. I sat there, staring at that little folder icon. A strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for all the years I'd spent contorting myself to fit into the asterisk idea of family. Relief that I finally had proof. That the slight twist in my gut every time Dad called asking for money had been my body warning me all along. The light in the kitchen shifted. My coffee went cold. I pushed the mug aside, looking back at the mortgage notification. 2 days until the next payment. For the first time since I signed those papers, a thought formed in my mind. Terrifying, but solid. I didn't have to let it go through. That thought sat in my mind like a small, steady flame, while the rest of me felt cold. I closed the banking window, pushed the laptop away. The idea stayed. Every step felt heavier, like my body already knew this was a turning point. My sweater was draped over a chair near the window. When I picked it up, I noticed my reflection. I looked tired. Not physically, but in that deep way that comes from years of being the peacemaker, the provider, the one who never said no. My eyes lingered on my face. How had I not seen it sooner? I pulled the sweater on, sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet. Memories surfaced. Not the cozy ones, the ones I'd stored in boxes. Moments that felt small at the time, but strung together, made a pattern I couldn't ignore. I was 17, accepted into a summer tech program in Portland. So excited, I told Dad the second I got home. He barely looked up from his newspaper. Too far. Don't act like you're better than everyone else. I folded the acceptance letter into a tiny square, hid it in my desk. That program could have changed everything. But Dad made wanting more feel disrespectful. Later, when I moved to Seattle, landed my job at Arcton Digital. Called him the night before my first day, hoping for some pride. He told me not to get a big head. Reminded me family came before career. Back then, I thought he meant it lovingly. Now, I heard the warning, asterisk keep sending help. Keep paying. Don't forget what you owe us. Asterisk I rubbed my palms on my jeans. Walked back to the kitchen. The air felt different now. Clearer. Like something had shifted. In the room. In me. I opened the fridge for no reason, stared at the shelves, closed it again. My mind wouldn't stop replaying things I'd brushed aside for years. Dad never shared financial details, but expected me to pay bills with zero explanation. Heather, sitting at that shiny dining room table, smiling when neighbors praised asterisk the remodel asterisk, as if asterisk she asterisk had chosen the tiles I'd spent an entire Saturday picking out. The time she told me, in her soft, suggestive voice, that my career was nice, but being supportive was better than being successful. The realization that all of it had been conditioning made my jaw tighten. I walked to my small desk in the corner of the living room, pulled out a stack of mail. Another envelope from the mortgage company. They still mailed physical copies. The same $2,750, due in 2 days. I laid it flat, stared until the numbers blurred. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. The preview. We need to talk about Christmas. My breath caught. I opened it. The message was short. Since you are not coming, we need you to transfer the catering deposit by tonight. Heather is handling the menu and said she sent you the total. It is $7,000. Do not be late. I let the phone drop onto the couch. No question mark. No greeting. No thank you. Just instructions. Like I was an employee who'd missed a deadline. I rubbed the back of my neck, went to the window. The sky had gone pale and cold, promising rain. $7,000 for catering. For a dinner I wasn't even welcome at. I hadn't even seen the invoice. A part of me, the hopeful daughter, wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe Heather typed it wrong. But the larger part, the one that had spent all morning staring at paperwork that proved the truth, knew better. I picked up the phone again. Scrolled to the family thread. Near the top, a message from Heather, late last night. The menu is finalized. Lauren will cover the deposit. Dad said she promised. I had never promised anything. Heat rose in my chest. I typed a reply. When did I promise that? My finger hovered. Long breath. Deleted it. I didn't owe them explanations. I clicked the phone dock. Walked back to the desk. The mortgage letter lay there like a question. For years, I'd answered that question with blind loyalty. Today, for the first time, I saw it clearly. I turned on my laptop, opened a blank document. My fingers hesitated for only a second. Then I started typing. Details I had avoided confronting. Payments, dates, repairs, silent agreements, broken promises. I wrote everything down, as if preparing a file for someone else. But this file was for me. The more I typed, the more my breathing steadied. The facts were plain. I had carried the financial weight of a house I didn't live in, and was no longer welcome in. I had paid for a family image my dad controlled, a comfort they accepted without gratitude. I had allowed myself to believe that helping them meant I was needed, loved, included. But this morning showed me exactly what I was to them. A source, a resource, a dependable income line. And now they wanted more. $7,000 for catering. On top of everything. I sat back, letting the truth settle without fighting it. A dull ache spread through my chest. But beneath it was something steadier. Resolve. I looked at the mortgage letter one more time. 2 days. That was all. I reached for my phone again, with a strange calmness. Opened the banking app. My thumb hovered over the AUTOPAY settings. Not ready to touch anything yet, but no longer afraid of the possibility. For the first time in my life, the thought of saying no didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like air. I sat there, letting that feeling fill me, until a different thought pulled me back. If I did this, truly did this, they would notice. And everything would change. The room felt quiet. Too quiet. A faint knock at my apartment door made me jump. Who would be visiting this early? I took a breath, studied myself in the reflection, and moved toward the door. Reached for the handle. Paused. A familiar voice on the other side. It was my mom. I froze, and still on the doorknob. Breath caught high in my chest. I hadn't heard my mom's voice outside my apartment in years. She usually let Dad speak for them. When she did reach out, it was by text, gentle and vague, like she was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Hearing her softly say my name through the wood made my stomach twist. I pulled the door open slowly. She stood there, wrapped in a long wool coat, hair pulled back, eyes darting over my face as if bracing for something. She held a reusable grocery bag. "Hi, honey." Her voice was warm, but it felt practiced. "Can I come in for a second?" I stepped back without answering. She walked past me, set the bag on the counter. I watched her take in my apartment, her gaze landing on the open laptop, the stack of envelopes. No hiding the mortgage letter. Her eyes lingered a moment too long. Then she turned to me with a small smile that looked like it weighed more than she did. I thought I'd stop by since I was in the area. She clasped her hands, just like she used to when she wanted to seem harmless. "I made you banana bread. I know you love it." I glanced at the grocery bag. Sure enough, a 4-wrapped loaf. My chest tightened. Growing up, banana bread was her peace offering. She'd always made it after Dad lost his temper, placing the warm loaf on the counter as if sweetness could replace an apology. One he never gave. I said nothing. She looked down at her hands, cleared her throat. Your dad mentioned you were upset. The words came out slowly, carefully. I wanted to hear from you about what happened. You know how he gets sometimes. He doesn't always choose the right words. A sharp little laugh escaped me before I could stop it. He told me I'm not welcome at Christmas. There's not really another way to phrase that, Mom. She winced, as if the sentence had been physically painful. He didn't mean it like that. Christmas is stressful. Plans got complicated. *complicated*. That was the word she used when Dad shouted at me for getting into a college he said was too far. The word she used when he refused to attend my graduation. It was always her way of turning harm into something small enough to swallow. I leaned against the counter, folded my arms. Mom, did you know about the vote? The words surprised me. I hadn't meant to say them yet. Her eyes flicked up, wide. Vote? What vote? I watched her carefully, and saw it. That tiny flicker of panic. She knew something. Not everything, but enough. The vote about whether I should come to Christmas. The one where everyone agreed I shouldn't be there. Her hands tightened. I wasn't part of that. I didn't agree to anything. Your dad said some things were better decided without dragging everyone into discomfort. So he told you after the fact. She didn't answer. Her silence was enough. She tried again, her voice softening. I came here because I wanted to talk about the catering deposit. He said you were confused about it. Anger fled. Confused. I repeated, feeling the heat rise up my spine. He told me to pay $7,000 for a dinner I'm not invited to. And you think I'm confused? She shook her head quickly. I'm not saying you have to pay. I just know Heather's been stressed and your dad doesn't want the holiday to fall apart. Not after everything this year. He thought maybe you could handle the deposit, like you always do. Like I always do. There it was. The quiet expectation, built over years. I wondered if she even heard herself. I pointed toward the stack of letters. Mom, that house is in your name and Dad's name. Yet almost every bill in that pile is addressed to me. Do you know how much I've paid over the years? Do you know the amount? She blinked at the letters, her expression tightening the way it did whenever she sensed danger, but didn't know where to stand. Honey, your dad said the house was a burden. He said you offered to help. We thought. She sighed. We thought you understood. I pushed my hands into my pockets to keep them from shaking. I offered to help in the short term. Not to fund your entire life in Tacoma. Not to pay every mortgage and repair bill while Dad bragged to the neighbors about how he saved enough to retire early. She swallowed. Guilt flickered. Lauren, I didn't know the exact numbers. Then ask. I gestured at the desk. Look at them. She took a small, hesitant step forward. But instead, she looked back at me with a helpless expression. I used to feel sorry for her. Not now. Something inside me no longer softened for her excuses. Honey, your dad isn't good with money, she whispered. He's never been. He means well, but he gets overwhelmed. He leans on you because he trusts you. That's all. I stared at her, stunned by how easily she rebranded manipulation as trust. Mom, he told me I'm not welcome. He told the family I'm not coming. And then he told me to pay for everything anyway. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were shining. I'm sorry you heard it like that. I felt something inside me break. Cleanly. Like a stick snapped in two. I was done. Done twisting myself into the version of a daughter Dad had built. And Mom had helped maintain. No more minimizing. No more explaining. No more letting them rewrite the truth. I took a slow breath. Mom, did you come here because you care? Or because he told you to talk me into paying? Her face crumpled for a second. Then she straightened. I came because I don't want the family divided. I came because if you refuse the deposit, your dad will explode, and I can't handle another holiday like last year. I came because Heather is anxious, and your dad said you were being emotional. There it was. The truth. Wrapped in soft words. She wanted me to keep the peace so she didn't have to live with the fallout. I stepped back. I am not paying. Not the catering. Not the mortgage. Not the utilities. Not another cent. The words hung in the air like a door slamming shut. She stared at me, lips parted in disbelief. Honey, please think about what that means. I already have. For the first time, she seemed genuinely afraid. Not for me. For what Dad would do. She reached for the banana bread bag again, as if she could fix this with carbs and nostalgia. Please, just talk to him before you make any decisions. I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. He made his decision. Now I'm making mine. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she took a long, unsteady breath and stepped toward the door. If you stop the payments, the house will go dark. She said it softly, like a warning she hoped I'd reconsider. Your dad will blame me. That was the moment. The clarity settled into my bones. Maybe he should. She froze, hand on the doorknob, absorbing that. Then, with a small nod that looked more like surrender than understanding, she let herself out. The door clicked. I stood alone in the quiet. Several long seconds. Then I walked back to the desk, pulled my laptop closer. My hand hovered over the AUTOPAY settings. This time, I wasn't shaking. I clicked, then clicked cancellation request. The screen asked me to confirm. My finger was poised. Then my phone lit up on the counter. Dad was calling. I drove to Tacoma without letting myself think too much. The highway was empty, a long gray stretch cutting through the wet December morning. My hand stayed tight on the wheel. Every few minutes, I replayed the audio file Ellie sent, hearing my sister's voice drip with that familiar mix of mockery and certainty. They had no idea I had proof of any of it. They had no idea I was done pretending. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, the clouds hung low and heavy. The house looked the same. The two-story blue home Dad had insisted on buying because he liked the idea of space, image, status. The kind of house that needed constant repairs, constant money, constant attention. Asterisk my money asterisk, as it turned out. I sat in the car for a long minute, watching the kitchen curtains shift. Someone was inside. I pictured it. Dad, at the breakfast table, coffee in hand, acting like he'd built this place with his bare hands. Mom, moving quietly around him, always careful, always small. And Heather probably sprawled across the couch, claiming she was tired, even though she'd never worked a full week in her life. I opened the car door, stepped into the cold. The front porch creaked. Before I could knock, the door swung open. My dad. Faded flannel shirt, the one he wore on weekends to look approachable. Though I'd never known him to be anything close to gentle. He looked surprised for half a second. Then his expression hardened. He remembered he was supposed to be offended by me. His voice was flat. What are you doing here? I kept my stay steady. I need to talk about some things. He leaned a shoulder against the frame, making no move to let me in. If this is about Christmas, Marin, the decision has been made. Everyone agreed. We want a peaceful holiday. The words hung in the cold air. Something twisted inside me. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed everything. My family didn't want peace. They wanted obedience. They wanted the version of me who paid their bills and stayed quiet. I kept my tone even. I'm not here for the holiday. I'm here about the house. His face tightened. Just slightly. Not enough for most people to notice, but I knew him too well. It was the same look he gave when he was about to lie. I stepped forward. The mortgage. The utilities. The insurance. All of it. He lifted his chin. It's handled. Your mother and I have it under control. I almost laughed at the lie. 4 years of statements lived in a folder on my desktop. Every payment tracked. Every AUTOPAY receipt under my name. Every draft pulled from my account. I took one more step until we were nearly eye to eye. Dad, you don't pay a single dollar into this house. His jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak. But I kept going. You have never paid the mortgage. You have never paid the electricity. You have never paid for the internet. You have never paid for the gas. You don't even know the name of the insurance company. Everything in this house runs on my income. Every bill has my name on it. His face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. What's your tone? A calm settled over me. No, asterisk you asterisk what's yours. Behind him, I saw movement. Heather. At the end of the hallway, arms crossed, expression smug. One look told me she knew I was supposed to be the problem today. She raised her chin. If you're here to pick a fight, you can leave. We don't need your drama. The irony hit me so hard I almost smiled. The family that cut me out was accusing asterisk me asterisk of drama. I looked at my dad again. Did you tell them the truth? Did you tell them who keeps this house running? He glared at me like I'd insulted him in front of guests. It's not your place to lecture us. We've done plenty for you. Heat rose behind my eyes. Not tears. Fury. Held back for too long. You haven't helped me since I was 18. I have covered your late notices. I have covered your repairs. I have covered asterisk everything asterisk so you could keep pretending to be the head of this family. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to that tone that used to make me fold. You're acting ungrateful. Asterisk ungrateful star. The word hit me like a cold slap. I pulled in a breath. No. I am done being quiet. I know what you said about me. I know what Heather said. I know all of it. His eyes flicked just slightly. He knew exactly what I meant. Heather moved closer. Scoffed. You always twist things. You always think you're some martyr. None of us said anything that wasn't true. A wave of cold washed over me. So they weren't even denying it. I held my ground. I'm not here to reconcile. I'm not here to argue. I am here to let you know that every AUTOPAY connected to this house has been cancelled. The mortgage, the electricity, the gas, the internet, the insurance. All of it. You will be responsible for your own home starting today. My dad stared at me, trying to decide whether to shout or slam the door. His voice came out low and sharp. You wouldn't dare. I met his eyes. I already did. Heather's mouth fell open. For a moment, she looked exactly like the spoiled girl she'd always been. What is wrong with you? I didn't answer. Didn't need to. I stepped back from the door. Looked at my dad one last time. I don't owe you anything anymore. He took a step toward me, but I turned before he could finish whatever threat he had lined up. I walked down the steps, cold air on my face, heart beating in an unfamiliar rhythm. It wasn't fear. It was release. It was the first breath of a life that didn't orbit around a man who took and took and took. I reached my car. My hands trembled just slightly, not from doubt, but from the adrenaline of finally saying the truth out loud. I sat behind the wheel, rested my forehead against my hands. When I looked up, the front door was still open. My dad stood frozen in the doorway. Heather hovered behind him. They looked smaller than I ever remembered. I started the engine. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. I glanced at it. The first 3 words made my stomach drop, and that's where Chapter 5 ends. The text started with 3 words that made my stomach clench. Check your Facebook. It was from my cousin Ellie. We weren't super close, but she was the quiet one at family gatherings, the one who watched more than she spoke. She didn't send messages lightly. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot a few blocks from my parents' street. Put the car in park. My hands were still tight on the wheel. The screen lit my face in the dim gray of the afternoon as I opened her message. There was a longer note underneath. She said my dad had been all over the neighborhood Facebook group that morning, talking about the big holiday event at the house, about how he and my mom had opened their home and hearts to the community this year. Ellie added that she was sorry and thought I deserved to see it for myself. She sent a screenshot. I tapped it with a thumb that felt heavier than it should. The image showed my parents' living room, the same one I grew up in, but it barely looked like the place I remembered. A huge Christmas tree, dripping with gold and red ornaments, almost reached the ceiling. The fireplace mantel lined with greenery and white candles. Tables pushed together with white tablecloths and place cards. In the center, my dad, arm around my mom, both smiling wide for the camera. Underneath the photo was his caption. He wrote about how blessed he was to finally host the kind of Christmas gathering his family deserved. How grateful he was that years of hard work had allowed him and my mom to create a warm, welcoming home for friends and neighbors. He talked about sacrifice. He talked about providing. I read his words twice, my vision blurring. There was no mention of me. No mention that the home he was parading in front of everyone had been paid for almost entirely by the daughter he had uninvited. The comments were a chorus of praise. People from the neighborhood wrote that my parents were a generous couple, and that it was inspiring to see a dad who cared so deeply about his family. A few old co-workers of his chimed in, calling him a stand-up man. Someone even wrote that he had always been the kind of dad who went the extra mile. The bitter taste in my mouth was sharp enough to swallow. I scrolled further. My mom had shared the same post to a local community group. Her added line said that after years of modest holidays, they were finally in a place where they could give back in a big way. My hands began to shake. I set the phone on my lap. I knew my dad liked to look good to other people. I knew he cared more about what neighbors thought than what his own daughter felt. But seeing it in black and white, seeing him accept applause for sacrifices I had made in silence, hit something deep that I had pushed down for too long. I sat in that parked car as the December light began to fade, watching people on my screen call my dad generous, loving, steady. I thought about the bills on my desk back in Seattle. I thought about the nights I stayed late at the office to get a bonus that immediately disappeared into this house in Tacoma. I thought about the voicemail where he told me I wasn't welcome. The word generous glowed under his photo like a bruise. I picked up the phone again, tapped out a reply to Ellie. I thanked her, asked if there was anything else I should see. She wrote back almost immediately. She said there were whispers going around that my dad had promised some kind of charity angle to this Christmas dinner. That he had told a local church group he was hosting families who would otherwise be alone for the holidays. That a small neighborhood newsletter was planning to write a feature about his big heart. Something inside me went very still. I opened the Facebook app. Searched for the neighborhood group. It wasn't public, but Ellie had sent an invitation link. I clicked join, and within a minute, a notification popped up. You've been approved. The group feed was full of the usual, lost dogs, porch pirates, someone complaining about fireworks. And then there it was again. My parents' house. My dad's name. The newsletter had posted a teaser. It said there would be a story in January about a local family who turned their home into a haven at Christmas. It mentioned my parents by name. It thanked them for opening their home and footing the bill. I leaned my head back against the headrest, closed my eyes. I could see my dad, rehearsing lines in his head, planning how he would tell the story to cast himself as the hero. The hardworking man who gave everything up for his family. The dad who never stopped providing. The idea of him sitting in that living room, soaking in the admiration, knowing full well he had told me to stay away, it made my hands curl into fists. After a while, I started the car and drove back to Seattle, the highway lights blaring slightly as I blinked hard to keep them steady. The drive felt shorter this time, like my mind was already racing ahead of the miles. By the time I pulled into my apartment building garage, the sky had gone from gray to full dark. I turned off the engine, sat in the quiet hum of cooling metal. My phone buzzed once more. Another message from Ellie. She said my dad had started making comments at the party about finally being in a good financial place. He had joked that he used to worry about every bill and now everything was under control. Someone had asked what changed. He told them he had been smart with money and planned well. I laughed once, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the small space of the car. Upstairs in my apartment, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I turned off my overhead lights, leaving only a lamp by the couch on. The soft pool of light made the room feel smaller, safer, like a circle I could stand inside. I opened my laptop, clicked into the evidence folder. Screenshots of bank statements. Copies of utility shut-off confirmations. The loan documents with my name as a co-borrower. The message threads where my sister called me useful. The audio file Ellie had sent, full of their careless words. And now, new screenshots of my dad's Facebook posts and the newsletter snippet. I organized them into subfolders. Mortgage. Utilities. Conversations. Public image. Every click felt deliberate, methodical, like I was building something solid, brick by brick. Part of me wondered if I was going too far, if collecting proof made me petty. Another part, the part that had watched my dad rewrite history in real time for years, knew exactly why I was doing it. He wasn't just taking my money. He was telling my story. He was erasing me from the narrative while still standing on everything *I* had given. I sat back, watching the cursor blink on the folder name evidence. It felt too small for what it represented. This was more than proof. This was a record of 4 years of my life, poured into a house where I was no longer welcome. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ellie. It was a co-worker from Arcton, someone in another department I barely saw outside of big all-hands meetings. He sent a link with a brief line that said he thought this might be your parents' place. The link opened to a local paper in Pierce County, a human interest piece preview. The headline teased a story about a retired couple hosting a community Christmas, using their own savings to create a magical holiday for neighbors in need. Asterisk retired couple. Own savings. Asterisk. I stayed at those words until they blurred. A slow, steady recognition settled in my chest. This wasn't a single disrespectful comment. This was a pattern. My dad didn't just expect my help. He expected my silence. He counted on it to build the reputation he wanted. Something shifted inside me as I closed the laptop. Until that point, canceling the autopays had felt like a way to protect myself, a line I drew so they couldn't keep draining me. Seeing that article, those posts, that praise, it changed the shape of it. It wasn't just about stopping the money anymore. It was about letting the truth catch up to the version of him he had been selling to everyone else. I turned off the lamp, sat there in the dim room, listening to the heater click softly. In the dark, with only the faint glow from the street outside, a new thought took shape. He had spent years teaching people how to see him. Now, with every silent shutdown and every unpaid bill, the real picture would start to come into focus. I didn't know yet exactly how far I was willing to go. But I knew one thing. I was done helping him hold up a story that was never true. That thought stayed with me when I finally went to bed. When I woke up the next morning. When I sat at my small kitchen table with a mug of coffee that went cold before I even drank half of it. The day after Christmas always felt strange, like the world was hung over from too much pretending. That morning, Seattle was quiet. The street outside my window glistened with leftover rain, and the sky had that washed-out winter look that made everything feel a little unreal. My phone, which had been vibrating non-stop the night before, was finally still. For almost an hour, I didn't touch it. I let myself move through small, normal things. Washed dishes, folded laundry, opened my work laptop, skimmed emails about year-end reports at Arcton. My brain only half-registered phrases about performance metrics and roadmaps. Eventually, the silence from Tacoma started to feel louder than the barrage had. I picked up my phone, thumbed through the notifications. A bunch of missed calls from the night before. Several from my dad, a cluster from my mom, a few from Heather. One from a number I didn't recognize. It turned out to be the catering company, which I ignored. New overnight messages sat at the top. The first was from my mom. She wrote that she hoped we could move past this, and that my dad had been under a lot of stress. She said she wished I hadn't chosen Christmas Eve to make such a big point. The second was from Heather. No greeting. Just a line telling me that I had ruined everything and that everyone at the party now thought our family was a joke. The third made me sit up straighter. It was an email forwarded to me from my dad. Subject line, in stiff capital letters, legal consultation. I opened it. He had clearly copied me on something he had sent to a local attorney in Tacoma. In his note, he described me as an unstable daughter who had shut off the utilities out of spite. He claimed that I had no right to cancel the mortgage payment because the house was his. He asked for advice on whether he could sue me for damages to his reputation and for emotional distress. At the end of the forwarded message was a brief response from the attorney. It was polite but firm. The lawyer wrote that if every account was in my name, my choice to cancel them was within my rights. He added that any misrepresentation of who had been paying the mortgage could be a problem for your dad, not for you. The attorney recommended that my dad resolve the matter privately. I read that last line 3 times. My dad hadn't sent me a personal apology. He hadn't even written a separate note. He had just forwarded the exchange like a threat that had backfired. I took a slow breath, and for the first time since this started, I felt something new wrap around the anger, validation. I forwarded the email to myself, dropped it into the evidence folder, and then stayed at the screen for a long time. It was one thing to know in my gut that I was doing the right thing. It was another to see a legal professional confirm that I wasn't the one crossing lines. A little later that morning, my work phone buzzed. It was a co-worker named David, one of the senior engineers who also did some consulting on contract issues for side projects. He didn't usually call me outside of work matters. I answered, keeping my voice neutral. He said he had seen the local article teaser that hinted at some drama in Tacoma and wondered if everything was all right. He told me, in his calm, measured way, that if I needed to run any legal questions past someone who knew contract law and finance, he had a friend who could help. I hesitated, then asked him a simple version of what was going on. I kept the details short. I said there was a house in my parents' name, a mortgage and utilities in mine, and that I had been paying everything for years. I said I had cancelled those payments after being told I wasn't welcome. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked if my name was on the deed. I said it was not. He asked whose names were on the mortgage and the utility accounts. I told him, mine. He exhaled slowly. From a legal standpoint, he said, that means you held the risk and the power. You've been paying for an asset you don't own. He told me that stopping payments wasn't fraud. It was me refusing to continue subsidizing something that didn't belong to me. His tone softened. If anything, he said, your dad may have opened himself up to scrutiny by letting you pay everything while he presented the property as his achievement, especially if he told any lenders or organizations something different. When we hung up, I felt steadier. The guilt my dad had always relied on was losing its grip. Around noon, a new text came in from Ellie. She wrote that things in Tacoma were ugly. According to her, the party had completely fallen apart after the lights went out and the catering fell through. Some guests left early, others stayed, but talked in low voices in corners. A few people had asked directly who handled the bills. She said that, in front of at least 3 neighbors, my dad had claimed there had been a banking error, that the mortgage company and the utility providers had made a mistake. One of the neighbors, whose brother worked for an energy company, had looked skeptical and asked follow-up questions. Ellie finished her message by saying she was sorry, but relieved. She said that for years she had watched my dad hold himself up as the hero of every story. She thought it was about time people saw behind the curtain. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, thinking about my younger self, the teenager who had believed that being quiet and helpful would one day earn real belonging, the college student who had skipped trips and shoes and dinners out so she could send money home, the young engineer who had signed loan documents because her dad told her they needed her just one more time. Every version of me had hoped that sacrifice would be noticed in more than whispers. Instead, my dad had chosen to pretend I was the problem the moment I stopped bending. That afternoon, while I was making tea, my email pinged again. This time, it was from a local reporter, the same one whose teaser link my coworker had sent me. She said she had received some anonymous documents regarding the Crane Ridge property and wanted to verify a few things. My first instinct was to shut the laptop. The old voice in my head, the one that echoed my mom's "please keep the peace," begged me not to answer. But the new part of me, the woman who had sat in the dark the night before and decided she was done being erased, told me to at least hear the questions. I wrote back and asked what exactly she needed to know. Her reply was straightforward. She said she had seen public records listing my parents as the owners, but the documents she received showed years of mortgage and utility payments from an account under my name. She asked if it was accurate that I had been financially responsible for the house since the purchase. She said she would not print my name if I requested anonymity. She only wanted the story to reflect the truth about who had paid for what. I read her email twice, then 3 times. If I confirmed what she already suspected, my dad's carefully built image could crack in front of more than just a handful of neighbors. The small article about a generous retired couple might become something very different. My hand hovered above the keys as I weighed what to say. On one side was the familiar pull of loyalty, even to people who had not shown it back. My mom's face floated into my mind, tired and resigned, always smoothing over conflict. On the other side was the stack of proof in my folder. 4 years of transactions. 4 years of uncredited support. 4 years of being convenient until I said no. I answered simply. I confirmed that every loan payment, every utility bill, and every major repair had been paid from my account. I explained that my name was not on the deed, and that there had been an understanding I would be added later. That never happened. I did not call my dad names. I did not use words like narcissist or abuser, even if they flickered across my brain. I stuck to facts. At the end, I wrote that if she chose to share any of it, I did not want my full name in print. I was not interested in revenge headlines. I only wanted the record corrected. When I hit send, a strange quiet settled over the room. I made my tea, stood by the window while the water cooled. The street outside was busy now. People hauling boxes back into their apartments, taking down travel bags, walking dogs with sweaters. Life moved forward. My phone vibrated again. This time it was my dad. Not a call. A text. He wrote that he knew it had been me who cancelled everything. He said that everyone now thought he was irresponsible. He told me that if I didn't fix this, he would never speak to me again. I stayed at that last line for a long time. Asterisk never speak to me again. Asterisk it was meant to sound like a punishment. For the first time in my life, it didn't scare me. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that, too. In the end, I wrote nothing at all. I set the phone down and wrapped my hands around the warm mug. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my laptop screen still glowing with the open email thread from the reporter. Whatever happened next, the story was not his alone anymore. And while I stood there, watching steam curl into the air, a new notification slid quietly into my inbox, carrying a subject line that made my heart thump once, hard. It was from the bank. The subject line mentioned the Crane Ridge mortgage in that formal, careful way banks always use. My stomach tightened, but I clicked it open before I could talk myself out of it. The email said they had noticed the most recent payment had not gone through and that, as a co-borrower, I was still listed as financially responsible. They invited me to schedule an appointment with a loan officer to discuss options and to review the account. I read it twice, then pushed the laptop back an inch and stared at the wall. For years, those notices had been background noise. I never let a payment slip, never gave the system a chance to notice anything. Now the machine had finally realized there was a human at the other end of those automatic drafts. I took a slow breath and picked up my phone. Before I could change my mind, I called the number in the email. The automated menu felt endless, but eventually I reached a real person, a woman with a calm voice who introduced herself as a mortgage specialist at the downtown Tacoma branch. She said she could meet with me in person if I was willing to come in. The old version of me would have apologized for bothering her during a busy week. This version just said yes, and wrote down the time she offered. 2 days later, I drove back down the interstate, the sky low and pale, the trees along the highway bare and slick with leftover rain. The bank was in one of those newer buildings with too much glass and a parking lot full of trucks that looked more expensive than most people's houses. Inside, the air smelled like printer toner and coffee, and a television in the corner rolled through financial tips no one was really watching. A young teller led me to a glass-walled office where a woman in her 50s stood to greet me. She had silver at her temples and a firm handshake that made me like her instantly. I shook her hand, sat down, clutching the folder I had brought like it was a shield. She pulled up the loan account on her screen and studied it for a moment, then turned back to me with a thoughtful look. "You're listed here as co-borrower," she said slowly, "and your parents are the sole owners on the deed. Is that correct?" I nodded. Yes. I signed so they could qualify. All the payments had been drafted from my account since the beginning. She tapped something on her keyboard. "I see that. Every payment for the past 4 years has come from an account in your name. You've never missed one, until now." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "That's right." She sat back and folded her hands. "May I ask why you decided to stop?" The truth felt heavy, but simple. Because I was told I'm not welcome in the house I'm paying for. Because I was told they had all agreed I shouldn't come to Christmas. Because I've been carrying the entire financial burden for years and they presented it as they sacrifice to everyone else. Her expression softened, but she didn't rush to fill the silence. That alone made me feel like I could keep talking. I laid the folder on her desk and opened it. Inside were printed copies of my bank statements, my pay stubs from Arcton showing my software engineer's salary, the mortgage payment confirmations, and the utility bills with my name across the top. I showed her the loan document header with my parents listed as owners and my own name in the smaller type of co-borrower. Claire skimmed each page carefully. She didn't look surprised, just tired in the way people do when they've seen too many unfair arrangements dressed up as family loyalty. From a lending perspective, she said, the bank sees you and your parents as jointly responsible for this debt. That means the loan impacts all of your credit. But in practice, based on this paperwork, you have been the only one truly paying. I nodded, my throat tight. She paused. You need to know that if no one makes the payments, the house can eventually go into default. That affects everyone on the note. I can't sugarcoat that. I swallowed. I understand. But I also understand that I can't keep pouring money into a house I don't own, where I'm not welcome. There has to be some way for me to step back. She tapped her pen against the desk once, then nodded slowly. There are a few options in situations like this. Sometimes one party refinances the loan solely into their name. Sometimes the property is sold and the mortgage is paid off that way. Sometimes the co-borrower petitions to be released, but that requires the other party to qualify on their own. She looked me in the eye. If your dad cannot qualify without you, the bank cannot force you to keep paying. We can only report what happens when payments stop. Her words landed with both weight and relief. The risk was real, but so was my right to stop being used. Claire slid a form toward me. This is a formal notice that you are unwilling to continue making voluntary payments on behalf of the primary occupants, she said. It documents that you have expressed concern about the arrangement. It doesn't remove you from the loan today, but it creates a record that you did not quietly agree to keep doing this. I read the short statement. It was nothing dramatic, just a line that said, I no longer intend to act as the sole payer for the property. I signed it with a hand that barely wavered. She stamped it and scanned it into their system. The sound of the scanner felt final in a way I cannot explain. When she was done, she leaned back. I'm not supposed to give personal advice, she said gently. But I'm going to say something as a woman who has been doing this for a long time. You shouldn't have to bankrupt your peace and your future for two adults who chose. I blinked hard, looked down at my hands. Thank you, I managed. She walked me to the lobby. As I passed the teller line, a man with gray hair and a navy sport coat walked in. He was on his phone, speaking loud enough for half the bank to hear. I recognized his profile before my brain even registered his voice. My dad. He hadn't seen me yet. He told whoever was on the line that he needed to speak to a manager immediately. He said there had been a mistake with his mortgage and that someone had frozen things behind his back. The word unfair came out of his mouth like he had just discovered it. Claire glanced at me, then at him. Her jaw tightened just slightly. Do you want to go a different way? She asked quietly. For a moment I considered slipping out the side door. Then I thought about all the years of walking around his moods, his temper, his version of a story. I straightened my shoulders. No, I'm fine. My dad ended his call and turned toward the counter. His eyes landed on me and widened, then narrowed so fast it might have been funny in another life. He stared at me in that lobby, his face red above his scarf. What did you do? He said, voice low but hard. The bank called me. They said there's a note on the account. They said you came in. People in the lobby shifted, their attention flicking in our direction. I could feel Claire standing just slightly behind me, a quiet presence. I kept my voice calm. I told them the truth, that I've been paying for everything, that I'm not going to keep doing it. If you want the house, you can figure out how to pay for it, or you can sell it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice further while his anger sharpened. You're making me look like a fool. I held his gaze. No, Dad, you did that on your own. His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he seemed at a loss for words. A woman in line pretended to look at her phone, but was clearly listening. A teller called the next customer, trying to keep the energy moving. For a strange, suspended moment, it felt like the whole bank was holding its breath. My dad tried again. You're my daughter, he hissed. Family doesn't turn on family. I felt something inside me harden into something clear. Family doesn't erase family either. His eyes flashed, and for a second, I thought he might raise his voice. Might cause a scene big enough that security would have to escort him out. Instead, he straightened his jacket and looked around, suddenly aware of the audience. This is not over, he muttered. He turned away sharply and marched toward another office, demanding again to speak to whoever was in charge. I watched him go, the way he puffed himself back up, trying to regain control before he even understood that it was slipping for good. Outside, the air smelled like cold and wet asphalt. I sat in my car for a while, hands on the steering wheel, watching people move in and out of the building. Behind the glass, my dad paced inside one of the offices like a caged animal. My phone buzzed where it sat in the cup holder. A new email notification popped up on the screen, the preview showing the first line. It was from the reporter. She wrote that the story had been updated and would run online that evening. I stared at the words. The gray Tacoma sky reflected faintly in the dark screen, and I realized this was the moment things were truly about to shift. Not just inside the bank system, but out in the world where my dad had spent years polishing his version of who he was. The gray Tacoma sky blurred behind the windshield as I sat there, gripping my phone, staring at the email from the reporter. She wrote that the updated article would go live that evening with the corrected financial information, the documents I had sent, and the acknowledgement that the house's expenses had been carried by me alone. No sensational language, no dramatics, just facts that would cut deeper than any headline. I dropped the phone into the console and started the engine. The heater blew a thin wave of warm air as I pulled out of the parking lot and merged onto the road. Traffic was light, the kind that made you notice every red light more than usual. I kept catching myself checking the rearview mirror, half expecting my dad's old truck to appear behind me. It never did. Back at my apartment, the air felt still, heavier than when I had left that morning. I hung my coat over the arm of a chair, set the folder on the kitchen counter. The silence was the kind that felt both calm and buzzing with something I couldn't quite name. I made tea, just to give my hands something to do. The water rattled in the kettle, a sharp reminder that my dad was probably in the middle of unraveling every lie he had wrapped himself in for years. I wondered what he had said to the bank manager. Wondered if he had blamed me, or if he had tried to charm his way through it the way he always tried first. The tea was too hot, but I took a sip anyway. Then my phone lit up on the counter with a vibration that made me jump. One missed call. Dad. Then another and another. 3 calls in less than a minute. I turned the ringer off and watched the screen go dark. A few seconds later, it buzzed again. Another missed call. Then one more. 5 calls. Then 10. The calls kept stacking, the numbers rising as if someone held their finger on the redial button like a weapon. I walked into my living room, pacing slowly, each buzz slicing through the air like a nervous beat. I had seen my dad angry plenty of times in my life, but this felt different. This was him out of control, his mask slipping in real time. By the 12th missed call, I put the phone face down on the sofa. I didn't want to watch it anymore. I went to my bedroom and began folding laundry that didn't need folding. When that ended, I reorganized a drawer I had already cleaned last weekend, anything to keep my hands steady. After a while, I went back to the living room. The phone lay silent. Then it buzzed again, short and sharp. A voicemail. I let out a slow breath and pressed play. His voice cracked with anger. He said he had spoken to the bank and knew exactly what I had done. He said I had no right to embarrass him in front of anyone, especially people he worked with on community projects. He said he had given his whole life to this family, and now I was making him look irresponsible. I didn't react. My heart didn't drop. I just listened with an almost strange detachment, as if I were hearing someone else's dad ramble into someone else's voicemail. Then he said something that did hit me. You owe me for everything I did for you. I paused the message. I owed him for what ? For the stories he used to brag about in front of neighbors, like how he worked double shifts when I was little, even though I later learned it was my mom who covered most bills. For the truck he bragged about buying for himself, but had used my college money to put the down payment on. For the mortgage I had been secretly paying while he took credit for being a responsible homeowner. The phone buzzed again, another voicemail, followed by what looked like a text notification. I didn't open it. Instead, I sat on the sofa and pulled my knees up, staring at the ceiling while my mind drifted back to the last Christmas before all this happened. I remembered how he had stood at the head of the table, talking about the importance of unity and gratitude. I remembered the applause he got when he complimented the house. I remembered thinking that the warmth in the room never quite reached me. The phone buzzed again. A cascade of alerts lit up the screen. 10 more missed calls. The counter jumped like it was racing. 15, 20. By the time I stood up and walked closer, the number had reached 27. I pressed my palm to my forehead and let out a breath through my teeth. I knew that once the article went live, the calls would get worse. He would want answers, someone to blame, someone to yell at behind closed doors. But there was no version of me left who would let him do that. The phone buzzed again. 29, 30. It was building, the same way storms build on the coast. Quiet at first, then fast, then all at once. I could feel something shifting, like the ground beneath an old house finally giving way after years of pressure. By 35 missed calls, I stepped onto my balcony. The evening sun was low, turning the sky a soft pink that made the air feel strangely calm. Despite everything, cars moved slowly down the street. Downstairs, someone walked their dog past the mailbox. My phone buzzed again in my hand. 41. I didn't answer. I didn't even bring it to my A. I just held it loosely while the buzzing stopped and silence spread over the balcony like a blanket. Then the final vibration. 42 missed calls. I let my hand fall to my side and closed my eyes. The cool air brushed against my face. Somewhere below, a wind chime rang softly. The world kept moving, steady and indifferent. Inside, the phone lit up again. A new voicemail. I stood there for a moment, not ready to hear it yet, not ready to let his voice back into my head. Instead, I stepped back inside, shut the balcony door, and placed the phone on the coffee table. I walked to the kitchen sink, ran the water, and washed my hands slowly. The simple motion grounded me more than anything else that day. When I finally turned off the faucet, the apartment felt quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that hides dread, but the kind that waits. I dried my hands and leaned on the counter, staring at the phone across the room. A dim glow pulsed from the screen every few seconds. It felt like the moment before a fuse reached the fire. Something was coming next, and I knew it would change everything that followed. The glow on the phone kept pulsing across the darkened living room like a tiny heartbeat as I stood by the kitchen counter, hands still damp from the sink. My apartment felt suspended between two moments, the one I had just lived in, and the one waiting on the other side of that voicemail. I crossed the room slowly, each step feeling heavier than it should have, and finally picked up the phone. I tapped play. My dad's voice filled the room, ragged and raw. He sounded cornered, like an animal trying to find a way out. He said he had spoken to the bank manager, and that they told him the loan was now under review because of my statement. He said the article was out and people were already messaging him. He said the neighbors were talking. He said somebody at the fire hall had forwarded the link to the group chat. He said I had humiliated him in the worst way. Then his tone shifted, trying to soften, trying to claw back control. He said he had always done his best. He said I misunderstood him. He said this was all a big mistake that we could fix quietly if I would just call him back. I let the message play until his voice faded into static. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the wall while the house settled around me, small creaks in the ceiling, the distant hum of a car rolling through the parking lot. It struck me that this was the first time in years I had heard him sound unsure star. The first time I had heard anything close to fear in his voice. I sat the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the street lights glowed against the pavement, and a neighbor walked her dog through the cold night air. Life was still happening, normal and steady, while mine had shifted in one breath. When I turned back toward the room, something inside me felt clearer. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just certain. I picked up the phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for the Tacoma County civil clerk. A voice answered on the second ring, a young man who sounded new to the job. I asked a few questions about property disputes, co-borrower liabilities, and the steps for formally documenting financial contributions toward a house not legally mine. He told me everything simply. I took notes, thanked him, and ended the call. Then I sat at my dining table and opened my laptop. The light from the screen washed across the room as I created a document titled Financial Record Summary. I listed every dollar I had put into that house, every month of utilities, every repair, every bill, every late night I had stayed awake transferring money I should have spent on myself. The total looked unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. The apartment stayed quiet while I gathered everything into a clean folder on my computer. When I closed the laptop, the weight that had been living in my chest for years finally shifted. I stood up, walked to the entryway, and slipped my shoes back on. The night air felt crisp when I stepped outside. I walked down the stairs and across the parking lot to the mailbox that sat under a dim light. My breath rose in small clouds as I reached for the metal handle. Inside was a single envelope. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My dad's letters were sharp and angled, like he etched each line instead of writing it. I held the envelope for a moment, my thumb brushing the corner. Then I opened it. The letter inside was short. He wrote that I had gone too far. He wrote that I had embarrassed him in front of people who had known him his whole life. He wrote that the family should keep things inside the house. He wrote that he hoped I understood the damage I had done. He did not write anything about the damage he had done. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it away. I simply carried it back to my apartment and placed it in the same drawer where I kept documents from my old life. That drawer used to hold weight. Now it felt like nothing more than paper. The next morning, the sunlight cut across my bedroom floor in thin golden lines. I made coffee slowly, savoring the warmth rising from the mug, letting my breath settle. My phone buzzed on the counter, but this time it was a text from someone else. It was the reporter. She wrote that the article was live and that she had updated it again with a brief editor's note clarifying the financial records. She said the response was already strong. She wrote that she appreciated my willingness to tell the truth, even when it was difficult. I thanked her and closed the message. For the first time, I felt like the story was no longer twisting in someone else's hands. It was standing on its own. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my cousin Jenna stood there, hands shoved deep into her coat pockets. She looked nervous in a way I had never seen before. She told me she had read the article. She said she had not known the full truth, and that the family group chat was an absolute disaster. She said my dad was yelling at everyone, accusing them of betraying him. She said my stepmom had been crying about their embarrassment, and that my brother Luke was furious that the truth was out. I listened quietly. When she finished, she looked at me with something like regret. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not seeing it sooner." For once, I didn't shrug it off. I just nodded. We talked for a few minutes at my door. She said she didn't expect forgiveness and wasn't asking for anything. She just wanted to acknowledge the damage. When she left, my apartment felt warm again, like the air had shifted just slightly. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I walked out to the little trail behind my building. The trees rustled softly above me. A creek ran thin and icy along the edge of the path. I stood there with my hands in my pockets, breathing in the cold, letting it settle inside me, the way truth finally had. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who tried for approval, who paid for peace, who bent herself into shapes just to fit the outline of someone else's expectations. Then I thought about the woman I am now, the woman who had chosen her own life. The woman who had finally stepped out of the storm. When I returned to my apartment, the living room felt brighter. The silence felt like a friend. The weight was gone. I sat down on the sofa and let myself breathe fully for the first time in a long time. And if you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this. Silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments, what does integrity mean to you, and where are you listening from?